This is the dumbest yet greatest console ever heard of. The story I am about to tell you is a true story about a piece of hardware that looked to bring the hopes and dreams to life of children everywhere. What this system promised to do was amazing, but at the same time, for its era, it pitched to deliver something that was utterly, completely ridiculous. So with all that said, if this image is new to you, you're probably wondering what the hell it even is and what this mysterious monstrosity would have been capable of. But do not worry, fear not, gentle viewer. In today's exciting video, we are going to look to the past to discuss the story of one of the wackiest consoles ever thought of. I am Lady Decade. Let's remember the most delusional console that we have ever been told about and ask ourselves, was this all just a scam? When it comes to the history of stupid consoles, we are pretty much spoiled for choice. Instantly, images of the likes of the powerful 3DO, Amiga CD32 or Philips CDI might spring to mind, or if you are more familiar with spectacular car crashes, how about the disasters that were the Coleco Chameleon or the Intellivision Amico? As negative as those chapters were in gaming history, fortunately I think today's tale is more amusing than it is anything else. So buckle up tight as we revisit the oddness that was, this. A system that the company behind the idea would outline to investors as the ultimate way to play games. After all, how could any handheld system pitched in 1993 that aimed to not only feature its own library of bespoke games, but also accept and play NES, Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis games all on the go? Oh yeah, and did I mention that its own library of games would come on CDs, the futuristic media format that was taking the world by storm? And not just that, but look how sexy it is. Offering up all of these features, who wouldn't want one of these, right? It promised to do everything a gamer could ever wish for, making owning hardware from any of its competitors completely pointless. The device was explained to be the console of consoles. However, as exciting yet preposterous as all of this sounds, the idea quickly falls apart when you realise who the company and the people were who were behind such an attractive concept. Speaking of attractive concepts, get these videos early, speak with me directly, and gain other perks by supporting this channel on Patreon.
You forgot to say please.
To understand this story, we first need to switch our attention to a man named Vince Perry, a gentleman from Miami, Florida, who had grand visions of making a lot of money from the gaming industry. An old newspaper article published in the Miami Herald outlines that Vince identified himself as a businessman and professional investment banker. But away from his established working life, he was also a father, with it being fatherhood itself that gave him the epiphany that he could make a lot more money by getting involved in the gaming industry. This spark of inspiration arose through quickly realizing that the games his 9-year-old son wanted were incredibly expensive, with decent Nintendo and Sega games setting him back 55 to 60 buckaroos a pop. Considering this is an absolute fortune, he decided he wanted to do just what Sega and Nintendo do, but do it way cheaper. After all, nothing could possibly go wrong with competing with industry giants with absolutely no experience on your side. Games were just simple products for naive children, right? Fortunately, even Mr. Perry knew that this would be a tricky feat to achieve, but would quickly gain hope that games could be made and sold for cheap after witnessing his son playing an illegal product made in Taiwan that had 40 games on one cartridge. He said children all over his neighborhood were crazy about this cartridge and decided the way to make money from such a product would be to sell something similar but legally. So he would set out to make economically cheap gaming products of his own. Through this endeavour, he would meet a young man called Mario Gonzalez who would inform Vince that he had friends who were into making games, and that sounded like the perfect opportunity for him. Vince asked for his proof, and the crew would get back to him with a Tetris clone they made for an Amiga computer called Megatris. Vince loved it and agreed to hire them all to work on this new project. The newly employed team would be tasked with making an NES multicart, despite only having 1 week's training using using an NES dev kit and being asked to stick to a very tight schedule. While Perry had no game industry experience and his team of devs was as ragtag as they come, essentially not much more than a bunch of students, this did not stop Perry from using his connections in overseas banking to somehow convince private backers to hand over to him $5 million to go towards this insanity, money that would come pouring in from both Europe and Saudi Arabia. Away from utilising a cheap labour force, Perry also decided that another way he could save money in the gaming industry would be by releasing games, but simultaneously not paying any licensing fees to either Nintendo or Sega. After all, why give them a cut when he could circumvent this? He has actually gone on record to state that this was not illegal, simply unauthorised.
Not orthodox, I don't live by the rules.
Building on these crazy plans, Vince Perry and his team would even manage to get their own booth at the 1993 Consumer Electronics Show, an event whereby they would be able to distribute a pamphlet that would allow Perry and company to share their plans with the world. Before we get to mentioning their crazy console, we would be able to read about their multi-cards, which would outline: imagine the happiness a child will have in playing a new game every week for a year, all at a fraction of the cost of other new games. It is the first new product to provide an economical way of obtaining many exciting games at one low price. The company behind this statement would go by the name of Action Enterprises, and the cartridge they were talking about would be marketed under the now infamous name of Action 52. Yes, that's right, rather than sell cartridges with an excellent collection of high-quality pirated games like the ones that could be found produced in Taiwan, these unauthorized American-produced cartridges were packed to the brim with some of the worst NES games ever conceived. Beyond Action 52 itself, you may be able to recall that the cartridge's main event was a hilariously bad title known as Cheetah Men, a franchise that Vince Perry had on his hands, which he genuinely saw as the next Ninja Turtles. The pamphlet distributed by Action Enterprises would hype up what a huge deal the Cheetah Men were about to become, with promises that there were action figures on the way that were immediately going into production, with purchase orders even being offered that day. They would add that large figures would be coming soon, a clothing range and even a comic book series. Vince Perry was selling that his products, no matter how shoddy they were about to take over the world, and kids everywhere would be clamouring to play Action 52 and buy anything as long as it was associated with the Cheetah Men. What an absolutely deluded banker.
What an idiot.
But this is going to get so much worse, because neither the Cheetah Men nor the Action 52 were the magnum opus of crazy pitches that could be found in the pamphlet. That honour goes to the Action Game Master, the ridiculous system that Vince Perry claimed would be coming later, that shared the name of a character from the Cheetah Men's hilariously rich lore. The Action Game Master is a character mentioned in the Cheetah Men game, which, according to Mario Gonzalez, was also the name that was originally meant to go to game number 52 on the Action 52 cartridge. Gonzalez adds, this was supposed to be a final challenge where the player had to defeat all of the bosses from the 51 other games. Well into the project, Vince came to me and advised me he wanted a team similar to the Ninja Turtles. Since there was no arguing with Vince, we went with the Cheetah Men. Vince became enamoured with the characters and the story and quickly began shifting the focus of the cartridge to having the Cheetah Men as the main selling point. Vince began to talk about a standalone game, toys, a cartoon, and maybe even a movie. As mentioned, Vince would take the Action Game Master name and apply it to his crazy concept for a game console. The one game console to rule them all. You know, the console that could play games made for all other popular cartridge-based consoles on the market, as well as its own CD library. Action Enterprise made the totally delusional claim that the Action Game Master would be manufactured, and that by being able to play everything, it would immediately give their new product a vast library of ready-made software. Ah, and did I mention to you that you could also watch television on the go on this handheld? The only way I can describe this is that it's the game console equivalent of when Homer Simpson was tasked with designing the perfect car. I mean, even if this was legal and possible, how much would this thing have cost?
What does this monstrosity cost?
This monstrosity cost $82,000.
This game console would have sounded like the best thing ever to a child, but it sounds less feasible to an adult than the Intellivision Amico, especially considering that this was all the way back in the early 90s. So it's not surprising that it wouldn't be long before the company would go bankrupt. I wonder how all of those investors felt. I guess Perry might not have remained their favourite banker. So looking back at all of this, was all of this wackiness and pitches to investors some sort of scam? It's hard to know, as Vince Perry is a somewhat secretive individual who has disappeared from the limelight. In his Arcade Attack interview, Mario Gonzalez gives his take on all of this, stating, "Many give Vince a bad rap and accuse the whole Action 52 situation as some kind of scam. This is entirely wrong. Vince was a good businessman and he really believed in the concept of Action 52. The project's failure was only due to Vince's ignorance of the gaming industry and of video games altogether. He did not understand the vast array of variables that are required to make a successful video game. Quite honestly, at my young age, with the same lack of understanding, I was as much a dreamer as Vince was. The only difference was that he dreamed in dollar signs and I of being a game designer. He was a good boss." So reflecting back on all of this, what can we ask ourselves against the ridiculous Action Game Master console and Vince Perry's grand plans? Did Vince Perry have some genuinely good ideas that could help push the industry forward? Or was he the Tommy Tallarico of his day? Was he, as the kids say nowadays, Delulu? And do you think that he was lucky that all of this happened in the days before social media and YouTube? Subscribe and comment your thoughts down below, and if you want to support this channel in a more personal way, consider backing me on Patreon. See you soon.
Oi. Oi. Oi.